I became a drunk digital detective at 2 a.m. and uncovered my fiancée's bachelorette party secrets that I definitely was not supposed to see. 3 weeks before our wedding, I downed a few beers and decided to play social media Sherlock Holmes. What started as innocent phone snooping turned into an all-night investigation that would make the FBI proud. By sunrise, I had pieced together a story that made me question everything about the woman I was supposed to marry in 21 days. What I found went far beyond a lap dance. But let me back up and explain how a normal Tuesday night turned into the most destructive investigation of my life. The perfect storm of insecurity and alcohol. 3 weeks before his wedding day, our protagonist sat in his living room, nursing what he thought would be a casual drink after work. The wedding preparations have been consuming his thoughts for months, and lately something felt different about his relationship. He couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was, but those nagging doubts that creep into every engaged person's mind had started visiting him more frequently. Maybe it was the stress of planning a wedding or the weight of making such a permanent commitment, but he found himself questioning things he had never questioned before. His fiancée had returned from her bachelorette party the weekend before, and while she seemed happy and relaxed, he noticed she had been quieter than usual about the details. When he asked how it went, she gave him the standard responses about having fun with her friends and how great the restaurant was. Nothing suspicious, nothing concerning, just the normal amount of information someone shares about a night out with friends. But his brain, already primed by wedding anxiety, started filing these perfectly normal responses under the category of suspicious behavior. The drink started flowing as his thoughts shifted from wedding planning stress to wondering why his fiancée hadn't shared more photos from her bachelorette weekend. She usually posted everything on social media, but the bachelorette weekend seemed to have generated surprisingly few posts. His phone sat next to him on the couch, innocent and unassuming. Her laptop remained open on the coffee table from where she had been working earlier. Then it happened. A Facebook group chat notification lit up her phone screen with a preview that said, "Can't believe that happened." His alcohol-influenced brain immediately began constructing elaborate scenarios about what might have happened that was so unbelievable. The rational part of his mind whispered that it could be anything, probably something completely innocent. But the insecure part of his mind, amplified by the drinks, started spinning theories that would make conspiracy theorists proud. The combination of alcohol, insecurity, and easy access to her digital life created what would later prove to be a recipe for disaster. He justified looking by telling himself that engaged couples should be transparent with each other. They were getting married in 3 weeks, so they practically shared everything anyway. Looking at one text message wasn't really snooping, it was just being an involved partner. When he managed to guess her phone passcode on the third try, using their anniversary date, he felt like a criminal mastermind who had just cracked a safe. The initial text message turned out to be about something mundane, but by then, his investigative momentum had built beyond the point of rational stopping. The alcohol had convinced him that since he had already crossed the line into checking her phone, he might as well be thorough about it. That's when he found it. Deeper in the messages, he discovered a text about giving a stripper some slop and noticed a friend had been added on Facebook, things he swore he'd be okay with at a party. But seeing it spelled out in black and white hit differently than his theoretical acceptance. His drunk brain promoted him from concerned fiancé to lead detective on a case that suddenly felt very real. Her social media apps beckoned to him like digital sirens, calling him toward the rocks. Instagram stories from the bachelorette weekend played automatically as he scrolled through them, and he found himself analyzing each frame like he was studying surveillance footage. Every face in the background became a potential person of interest. Every location tag got mentally noted for future reference. Every laugh captured in a video got scrutinized for signs of secrets being shared. The laptop proved even more tempting as his investigative confidence grew. Facebook Messenger opened easily since she had remained logged in, and suddenly he had access to group chats between her and her friends about the bachelorette party planning and aftermath. What started as casual curiosity transformed into methodical research as he began taking screenshots and mentally cataloging information. Each new piece of information he uncovered made him feel more justified in his behavior while simultaneously making his behavior more unhinged. A group chat message about someone being so bad at the party became evidence of wrongdoing rather than probably just someone being bad at karaoke or dancing. Inside jokes between friends got interpreted as coded language hiding scandalous secrets. The more he discovered, the more convinced he became that his investigation was not only warranted, but absolutely necessary. His transformation from loving partner to paranoid detective happened so gradually that he didn't recognize how far he had fallen down the rabbit hole. The same man who trusted his fiancée completely that morning had become someone willing to spend hours analyzing her private conversations by midnight. The alcohol hadn't just lowered his inhibitions about snooping, it had actually enhanced his detective skills while completely destroying his judgment about using them. By 2 a.m., he had developed an entire system for his investigation. Screenshots got organized by date and relevance. Names mentioned in conversations got cross-referenced with her Facebook friends list. Timestamps got compared across different social media platforms to build a timeline of the bachelorette party events. He approached this investigation with more thoroughness than he had shown for any project at work, treating it like a graduate thesis on his fiancée's potential infidelity. The most ridiculous part was how completely reasonable this all seemed to his intoxicated mind. Sober him would have been horrified at the violation of privacy and the paranoid conspiracy theories. Drunk him felt like a genius who was finally getting to the bottom of things. The alcohol had convinced him that he was being smart and proactive rather than destructive and invasive. He genuinely believed he was protecting the relationship by investigating whether there was anything that needed protecting it from. As the night wore on and his investigation deepened, he had transformed into something that would have been impressive if it wasn't so completely unhinged. From zero to Sherlock Holmes in 3 beers, his investigation protocol would have impressed actual detectives if they weren't too busy questioning his sanity. This wasn't casual browsing through her social media like a normal person checking what their partner posted. He created a full command center in his living room, complete with screenshots organized by timestamp and notes scribbled on napkins. The laptop became his primary research station while her phone served as backup verification, and he treated every piece of digital evidence like smoking guns in a criminal case. The drunk detective discovered that Instagram stories could be screenshot before they disappeared forever, and he treated this revelation like he had just learned how to hack government databases. Every story from the bachelorette weekend got preserved for analysis. He studied group photos like he was identifying suspects in a lineup, zooming in on faces and trying to match them with names from her Facebook friends list. When someone posted a video of the group laughing at dinner, he watched it frame by frame, looking for clues about what they were laughing about. His investigation techniques grew more sophisticated as his blood alcohol level maintained his confidence. He learned that Snapchat has a map feature showing where people have been posting from, and he used this to track the group's movements with GPS-level precision. This man was conducting digital surveillance that would have impressed actual private investigators, all while slosh-drunk and operating on pure paranoia fuel. The evidence collection process became systematically organized as his investigation continued. He created folders on his phone for different categories of screenshots, sorting photos by time and platform. Messages got categorized by a level of suspicion, with anything unclear or containing inside jokes getting flagged as requiring further investigation. He approached this midnight snooping session with more systematic organization than most people bring to their actual jobs. His growing confidence made each new discovery feel like a major breakthrough in the case. Finding out that his fiancée had been tagged in a photo she hadn't posted herself felt like uncovering hidden evidence. When he discovered that one of her friends had posted and then deleted a story, his drunk brain interpreted this as someone trying to cover up a crime. Every normal aspect of social media behavior got reinterpreted through his investigation lens as potential evidence of deception. The most ridiculous aspect of his entire operation was how he treated normal party photos like they contained hidden messages. A group selfie where everyone looked happy became evidence that they were hiding something because their smiles looked too forced. A blurry photo from later in the evening got analyzed for background details that might reveal what they had been doing. When he found a photo where his fiancée was standing next to a man he didn't recognize, he spent 30 minutes trying to figure out who this person was and why they were in the photo. His cross-platform investigation skills reached their peak when he started comparing stories across different social media accounts. Her Instagram story showed them at dinner, but her friend's Facebook post from the same time revealed additional people in the background. He treated these discrepancies like he had uncovered inconsistencies in witness testimony, never considering that different apps simply record information differently. Then came the breakthrough that made his entire investigation feel justified. Deep in the message threads, he found what he had been unconsciously searching for all along. A text about giving a stripper some slop hit him like a punch to the gut. His theoretical acceptance of bachelorette party antics evaporated when he saw it spelled out in black and white. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was discovering she had added someone new on Facebook, someone whose profile showed he had been at the same bar that night. The timeline he had been building suddenly snapped into focus with terrifying clarity. The mysterious gap in social media activity, the blurry late-night selfie, the inside jokes between friends that he couldn't decode, and now this new Facebook friend with a message that simply said, "Had a good time and it was nice to meet you," dated from the night of the bachelorette party. His drunk brain connected these dots into a narrative that made his stomach drop. His sophisticated investigation techniques were being applied to what his rational mind knew was probably just a normal bachelorette party. But his alcohol-fueled paranoia had built an entire case around fragments of digital evidence. The same man who couldn't bring himself to ask his fiancée a simple question about her weekend had just completed an investigation that convinced him she had not only fooled around with a stripper, but had actually gone home with someone else that night. By 4 a.m, he had built a comprehensive case file that included photo analysis, timeline reconstruction, and message interpretation. He felt like he had solved the case of the century while simultaneously feeling like his world was falling apart. Every piece of evidence he had collected seemed to point toward the same devastating conclusion, and his drunk detective work had painted a picture that he wasn't sure he could ever unsee. The investigation had taken on a life of its own, transforming from casual curiosity into a full-scale digital archaeology project. But Facebook Messenger still beckoned to him with promises of even more evidence waiting to be uncovered. The Facebook Trail of Destruction. Facebook Messenger opened up like a digital treasure chest of evidence waiting to be analyzed. The group chat between his fiancée and her bachelorette party friends stretched back months, filled with planning details that he now read like classified intelligence reports. Every message about hotel arrangements and dinner reservations got scrutinized for hidden meanings. When someone wrote about bringing backup outfits for the weekend, his alcohol-soaked brain immediately wondered what kind of activities required backup clothing. The obvious explanation that women pack extra clothes for nights out never crossed his detective mind. Weeks of innocent party planning messages scrolled past his bloodshot eyes as he searched for smoking guns hidden in conversations about restaurant reservations and Uber arrangements. The friends had discussed everything from what shoes to pack to whether the hotel had a good pool, but his paranoid interpretation system transformed these mundane logistics into potential evidence of premeditated deception. When someone mentioned hoping the weather would be good for their activities, he spent 15 minutes wondering what outdoor activities might require secrecy. Her friend list had grown by 4 new people since the bachelorette party, and he treated each new addition like discovering suspects in a criminal network. The profile that broke his brain belonged to someone named Mike, who had 0 mutual friends with his fiancée, but somehow ended up on her friends list the day after the party. This random construction worker who posted mainly about sports and beer had somehow intersected with his fiancée's life during one weekend, and his drunk brain constructed elaborate theories about how this intersection had occurred. Mike's profile showed a guy who looked like he spent his weekends at dive bars and his weekdays operating heavy machinery, exactly the kind of person his fiancée would never normally encounter in her corporate marketing job. The photo tagging feature opened up entirely new investigation possibilities that he approached with the intensity of someone analyzing crime scene evidence. His fiancée had been tagged in 6 photos from the weekend she hadn't posted herself, and he studied each one like he was looking for fingerprints at a murder scene. One photo showed the group at dinner, but when he zoomed in on the background, he noticed a table of men sitting nearby who appeared to be looking in their direction. His investigation notes probably included detailed descriptions of these random restaurant patrons who had the misfortune of being captured in the background of a bachelorette party photo. Comments and reactions on posts became his personal code-breaking challenge. When a friend posted a group photo with the caption, "What happens at bachelorette stays at bachelorette," followed by a winking emoji, he analyzed this message like it contained state secrets. The 14 laughing emoji reactions from different friends got interpreted as evidence that something scandalous had happened rather than just women responding to a silly inside joke. He screenshot the entire comment section and spent 20 minutes trying to decode what the crying laughing emoji from her cousin might signify in the context of whatever secret activities had occurred. Timeline analysis became his specialty as he pieced together the group's movements using photo timestamps and location tags. The group had checked into their hotel at 3 in the afternoon, posted dinner photos at 7, and then there was a mysterious 4-hour gap with no social media activity until someone posted a blurry group selfie at midnight. His investigation timeline looked like something law enforcement would create to track criminal activity, with detailed notes about each location and time gap. The obvious explanation that people sometimes put their phones away to enjoy themselves never occurred to his evidence-collecting mind. Then he found the message that made his stomach drop to the floor. Buried in the aftermath conversations was a simple exchange that his paranoid brain interpreted as a confession of guilt. A message from Mike that simply said, "Had a good time and it was nice to meet you," dated from the night of the bachelorette party. No context, no explanation, just a polite message that could have meant absolutely anything, but felt like a smoking gun to his alcohol-influenced detective work. His evidence collection had grown so comprehensive that he started creating folders on his phone to organize different categories of screenshots. Photos got sorted by level of suspicion, with anything containing unidentified people or unclear activities getting flagged for additional analysis. Messages got categorized based on how much inside information they contained, with cryptic references receiving the highest priority for investigation. His drunk organizational system rivaled what most people use for their actual work projects. The rational part of his brain, buried somewhere beneath layers of alcohol and insecurity, occasionally whispered that none of this actually proved infidelity. A new Facebook friend could be anyone they met that weekend. A polite message could be completely innocent. Side jokes between friends could be about anything from karaoke performances to someone spilling wine on their dress. But his paranoid investigation had built such momentum that these rational explanations got drowned out by the conspiracy theories his drunk mind preferred to believe. By 5 in the morning, he had constructed an entire narrative about the bachelorette party weekend based on fragments of social media activity that would have made fiction writers jealous. His story involved mysterious men, deleted evidence, coded messages, and cover-up activities that existed mainly in his alcohol-influenced imagination. The same social media posts that would have looked completely innocent to any rational observer have been transformed into evidence of elaborate deception through the power of insecurity, alcohol, and too much time spent analyzing digital breadcrumbs. His investigation had reached the point where he needed to organize all this evidence into something that made sense, and his living room was about to become the command center for the most ridiculous detective operation of his life. The all-night evidence collection marathon. His living room transformed into something that would make actual detective agencies jealous as he spread his investigation materials across every available surface. Screenshots covered the coffee table in carefully organized piles, sorted by platform and suspicion level. His notebook filled with timestamps, names, and cryptic observations that probably made sense only to his sleep-deprived brain. Empty beer bottles lined the couch like trophies marking each breakthrough in his investigation. If he had owned a corkboard and red string, he definitely would have created a conspiracy wall connecting all the dots he thought he was seeing. Sleep became irrelevant as his investigation. Momentum built beyond the point of rational stopping. His eyes burned from staring at screens for hours, but he convinced himself that closing them for even a few minutes might cause him to miss crucial evidence. The combination of alcohol and adrenaline kept him alert in the way that only comes from believing you're on the verge of a major discovery. Every new piece of information felt like finding another piece of a puzzle that was probably just a picture of normal people having normal fun at a normal party. His note-taking system reached professional levels of detail as he documented every observation with the precision of someone building a legal case. When he found a photo where his fiancée was holding what appeared to be a cocktail he didn't recognize, he wrote down the time, location, and detailed description of the drink as if it were evidence of criminal activity. His handwriting grew increasingly messy as the night progressed and fatigue set in, but his dedication to documentation never wavered. Pages of notes covered topics ranging from facial expressions in photos to the significance of emoji choices in text messages. The evidence organization system grew more sophisticated as his collection expanded beyond what his tired brain could easily remember. He created folders on his phone labeled with code names like timeline evidence and unknown contacts that made him feel like a spy operating under deep cover. Screenshots got numbered and cross-referenced with his handwritten notes. His drunk organizational skills had reached levels that most people don't achieve for their actual work projects, applied to what was probably just documentation of a normal girl's weekend. Cross-platform analysis became his specialty as he compared timestamps and locations across different social media apps with the precision of someone tracking criminal movements. When Instagram showed the group at a bar at 10 p.m., but Facebook indicated they were still at dinner at the same time, he treated this discrepancy like finding inconsistencies in witness testimony. The obvious explanation that different apps record time differently never entered his conspiracy-focused thinking. He approached these technical glitches like they were deliberate attempts to mislead investigators. His paranoia reached peak levels when he started analyzing the metadata of photos to determine exact posting times and locations. He discovered that some social media platforms embed GPS coordinates in images, and he used this information to map the group's movements with precision that would impress actual surveillance professionals. His investigation had progressed from casual snooping to what resembled a federal investigation into organized crime, applied to women taking selfies at restaurants and bars. Message interpretation became his personal cryptography challenge as he assigned suspicious meanings to perfectly innocent conversations between friends. When someone texted "you're so bad" with laughing emojis, his sleep-deprived brain immediately wondered what kind of bad behavior this referred to, rather than recognizing obvious friendly teasing. Inside jokes between friends got treated like coded communications hiding scandalous secrets. His ability to find sinister meanings in harmless conversations had reached levels that would impress conspiracy theorists everywhere. The physical toll of his all-night investigation started showing as his eyes grew bloodshot and his hands shook from too much caffeine and alcohol. But his conviction that he was closing in on the truth kept him going through the exhaustion. Each new screenshot felt like gathering evidence for the trial of the century. Every cryptic message between friends seemed to confirm his growing suspicions about activities that probably consisted of normal bachelorette party shenanigans like karaoke and dancing badly to music they loved in college. Photo analysis reached forensic levels as he studied lighting conditions, background details, and facial expressions for signs of deception or hidden activities. A group selfie where everyone looked slightly tired became evidence that they had been engaged in strenuous activities rather than just staying up late talking and laughing. He examined the reflection in windows and mirrors, looking for additional people who might have been present but not visible in the main photo. His investigation techniques had progressed beyond what most people apply to actual mysteries in their lives. His confidence in his detective abilities grew with each piece of evidence he collected, making him feel like a criminal mastermind who was finally getting to the bottom of things. By 5 a.m., he could have earned a PI license, but he still couldn't muster the courage to ask her a single question. His drunk brain had convinced him that this elaborate investigation was not only justified, but absolutely necessary to protect their relationship. As sunrise approached and his evidence collection reached overwhelming proportions, he sat surrounded by the fruits of his investigation, feeling like he had uncovered the scandal of the century. Screenshots covered every surface, notes filled multiple pages, and his phone storage was nearly full from preserving what he believed were smoking guns of deception. The same social media posts that any rational person would have recognized as normal party documentation had been transformed through the power of insecurity, alcohol, and sleep deprivation into evidence of elaborate betrayal. His masterpiece investigation was complete, and he felt ready to present his case to the world. The fact that his case probably consisted of evidence that his fiancée had gone out, had fun with friends, and posted some photos about it never crossed his exhausted mind. But before he could figure out what to do with the morning after awkwardness Olympics, the sound shot through his sleep-deprived nervous system like electricity, reminding him that his all-night investigation had to transform into Academy Award-winning acting within the next few minutes. He scrambled to hide the evidence of his detective work, shoving empty beer bottles into the recycling bin while trying to make the living room look like a normal person had spent the evening there instead of a paranoid investigator building conspiracy theories. Her footsteps coming down the stairs triggered a fight-or-flight response that his exhausted body was not prepared to handle. His heart started racing as he realized he had to pretend that everything was perfectly normal while his brain screamed about all the evidence he had uncovered during his midnight investigation. The man who had spent 8 hours analyzing her social media posts like a federal agent now had to act like a loving fiancé who trusted her completely. She walked into the kitchen looking completely normal and refreshed, which created an immediate contrast with his appearance that resembled someone who had been wrestling with bears all night. Her hair was perfectly styled for work while his looked like he had been electrocuted. She wore her usual morning smile while his face probably looked like he had witnessed crimes against humanity. The disconnect between her normal Tuesday morning energy and his internal apocalypse was so obvious that he wondered how she didn't immediately realize something catastrophic had happened. The first test of his acting abilities came when she noticed the lingering smell of alcohol and asked what he had been up to the night before. He reeked of liquor and felt sloshed as he spun his own nightmares, telling her he'd had trouble sleeping and needed a few drinks to relax. The explanation sounded unconvincing even to his own ears, but she accepted it with the trust of someone who had no reason to suspect her fiancé had transformed into a private investigator overnight. When she moved closer to give him their usual good morning kiss, his body went through the motions, while his mind screamed about everything he thought he knew about what she had done during her bachelorette party. The physical contact felt like acting in a play where only he knew the real script while she continued performing the normal relationship scene. He followed through with it, but honestly felt empty doing it, like he was watching himself in third person through a TV screen. Her casual questions about his well-being became increasingly difficult to navigate as his guilty conscience battled with his anger about his discoveries. When she asked why he looked so tired and whether any stress was related to the marriage, he had to resist the urge to launch into a presentation about his findings complete with screenshots and timeline analysis. He managed something along the lines of loving her and wondering how anyone could be stressed about marrying their perfect person, while internally his brain exploded with sarcastic observations about her weekend activities. The coffee-making routine became an exercise in pretending normalcy while internally combusting. She moved around the kitchen with her usual morning efficiency, while he tried to remember how to act like someone who hadn't spent the night investigating whether his fiancée was cheating on him. The coffee table still showed signs of his investigation chaos, despite his hasty cleanup efforts, and he found himself strategically positioning his body to block her view of the remaining evidence scattered across her living space. Her normal morning routine of checking her own phone while drinking coffee created additional torture as he watched her scroll through the same social media platforms he had spent all night analyzing. When she smiled at messages from her friends, his paranoid brain immediately wondered whether those messages contained references to activities he had uncovered during his investigation. Her casual interaction with technology that had been his primary research tool for 8 hours felt like watching someone handle evidence from a crime scene. His responses grew shorter and more mechanical as the morning progressed and his acting abilities reached their limits. When she asked direct questions about his mood or behavior, he found himself giving answers that sounded like someone reading from a script rather than having natural conversation. The guilt about snooping, mixed with anger about what he thought he had discovered, created a toxic combination that made normal interaction nearly impossible, while she remained completely oblivious to the internal warfare happening 3 feet away from her. The final test came when she asked whether he was excited about finalizing wedding details that week, creating a moment where his fake normalcy almost cracked completely. His brain flooded with thoughts about whether there would even be a wedding. After he confronted her with his findings, while she stood there expecting enthusiasm about flower arrangements and seating charts, The disconnect between her future planning and his internal conviction that the relationship was over created a surreal situation where they were having completely different conversations while using the same words. When she finally left for work with her usual kiss goodbye, he stood in their empty kitchen feeling like he had just completed the most difficult performance of his life. The 8 hours of investigation had been mentally exhausting, but the 30 minutes of pretending everything was normal had been emotionally devastating. His guilty conscience about violating her privacy battled with his anger about what he believed she had done, creating the perfect storm of relationship dysfunction that would only get worse as the day progressed. The silence that followed her departure felt deafening after the intense pressure of maintaining his facade. His exhausted brain, no longer required to perform normalcy, began shifting into an entirely different mode of operation. The great wedding cancellation caper. The moment she left for work, his brain shifted into full nuclear mode without any transition period or rational thought process. He sat in their kitchen surrounded by the evidence of his all-night investigation and made the kind of life-altering decision that most people take weeks to consider. Within 15 minutes of her car pulling out of the driveway, he had decided that their 3-week engagement countdown had just become a permanent cancellation. The man who couldn't bring himself to ask his fiancée about her weekend had no problem making unilateral decisions about their entire future based on his drunk detective work and sleep-deprived paranoia. He cold-called the venue, florist, caterer, all within 15 minutes. No hesitation, 15% cancellation fees be damned. The venue coordinator sounded confused when he explained that the wedding was off effective immediately, asking whether they wanted to postpone or reschedule instead of completely canceling. His response that he really didn't care about the financial losses probably made the coordinator wonder whether she was dealing with someone having a mental breakdown rather than a rational adult making informed decisions about his future. When the florist mentioned their cancellation policy, he responded with the indifference of someone who had moved beyond caring about money because he was dealing with what he believed were crimes against his relationship. His packing strategy resembled someone preparing to flee the country rather than someone ending a relationship like a normal adult. He gathered his most important possessions with the systematic approach of someone who might never return rather than someone who could have just moved to his brother's couch for a few days while they figured things out. Important documents went into folders, clothing got organized by priority level, and personal items got sorted based on sentimental value rather than practical need for a temporary separation. The hotel booking process involved finding accommodations exactly 60 miles away, far enough to feel like he had escaped, but close enough to handle the logistical nightmare he was creating. His booking confirmation email probably felt like receiving coordinates for a witness protection program rather than just reserving a room for a few nights while emotions cooled down. The distance felt appropriate for someone fleeing relationship crimes rather than someone who could have stayed local and dealt with the situation through adult conversation. His evidence organization reached professional levels as he prepared digital files containing all his investigation findings like he was building a legal case rather than dealing with relationship insecurity. Screenshots got transferred to a secure folder on his phone for safekeeping, notes got transcribed into a document that resembled a criminal report, and social media evidence got compiled into what looked like a prosecution brief. His preparation suggested someone who expected to present his findings to a tribunal rather than having a conversation with the woman he planned to marry 3 weeks earlier. The taxi ride to his temporary exile felt like a covert operation as he sat in the back seat with his evidence files and emergency luggage, watching his neighborhood disappear like he was leaving behind a crime scene, rather than just avoiding an uncomfortable conversation. His phone buzzed with normal messages from wedding vendors and family members who had no idea that he had just detonated their carefully planned celebration. The disconnect between his internal drama and the outside world's normal functioning created a surreal situation where he felt like the only person who knew the truth about everything. His hotel check-in process involved paying for an extended stay that suggested someone planning a lengthy exile rather than someone who could probably resolve his relationship issues with one honest conversation. The desk clerk probably wondered why someone was booking a long-term stay with the urgency of someone fleeing natural disasters. But his emotional state had progressed beyond caring about appearances. His room became his temporary command center, where he could review his evidence and plan his next moves without having to pretend everything was normal. Setting up his temporary living situation felt like establishing a base of operations for a complex mission rather than just hiding from relationship problems that could probably be solved through basic communication skills. His laptop got positioned for optimal evidence review, his phone got organized with important contacts for handling the wedding cancellation logistics, and his notes got spread across the hotel desk like someone planning military strategy rather than figuring out how to talk to his fiancée about his concerns. The irony of his elaborate escape plan was that he had put more effort into avoiding conversation than most people put into planning actual conversations. His dramatic exit strategy involved more logistics than some actual spy operations, complete with secure communications plans and evidence preservation protocols. The man who had spent 8 hours investigating his fiancée's social media had somehow concluded that the appropriate response was creating an even more elaborate plan for disappearing, rather than just asking her about what he thought he had discovered. His phone remained silent during the first few hours of his exile, which felt ominous rather than peaceful, since he had basically vanished without explanation while she was at work expecting to come home to normal wedding planning discussions. The calm before the storm was building, as his dramatic disappearance was about to create a crisis that would involve family members, friends, and probably local authorities if his vanishing act continued much longer. By evening, his hotel room looked like a crisis management center where someone was coordinating response to a major emergency rather than just dealing with relationship insecurity that could probably be resolved through one difficult but honest conversation. His elaborate preparation for confronting his fiancée with evidence had somehow transformed into an equally elaborate plan for avoiding confrontation entirely. What he didn't realize was that his mysterious vanishing act was about to trigger a communication avalanche that would make his midnight investigation look like child's play. The great disappearing act and phone explosion. His phone started buzzing at noon with the intensity of an emergency broadcast system, transforming his hotel room into the center of a crisis he had created through his dramatic vanishing act. By hour 6, 43 missed calls and 78 text messages had accumulated from people who had progressed from mild concern to scale panic about his unexplained disappearance. His fiancée had called 17 times before recruiting her entire social network to join what had become a search effort that resembled coordinating disaster relief rather than trying to locate someone hiding in a hotel room 60 miles away. He sat watching his phone light up constantly while feeling like a criminal mastermind who had successfully executed the perfect disappearing act. Each incoming call felt like validation that his dramatic exit had achieved maximum impact, proving that people finally understood the gravity of the situation he believed he had uncovered. The growing desperation in the voicemails made him feel vindicated about his response to what he had discovered during his midnight investigation, while everyone else was probably wondering whether he had suffered some kind of mental breakdown that required professional intervention. Her sister's voicemails provided the first glimpse into the chaos his disappearance had created on the other end of the phone calls. The messages started with casual concern, but quickly escalated to desperate attempts at damage control as she tried to console his fiancé while simultaneously trying to locate him. Her sister's voice grew increasingly frantic as she described finding his fiancé crying uncontrollably and begging everyone to help find him, not understanding why he had vanished without explanation. The sister's messages revealed that his dramatic exit had transformed their living room into a crisis management center, where multiple people were coordinating search efforts and trying to prevent his fiancée from having what sounded like a complete emotional breakdown. The parental involvement elevated his disappearance from relationship drama to family emergency when both sets of parents joined the communication bombardment around hour 4. Her father left a voicemail that apologized for his daughter's actions and begged him to come home so they could discuss everything like adults, while her mother's message sounded like someone dealing with a medical emergency as she asked whether he was safe and whether they needed to organize a search party. His own parents entered the fray after his fiancée called them in desperation, with his mother's voicemails progressing from confused questions to increasingly frantic demands that he call immediately to confirm he was alive. The calls kept piling up as his refusal to respond created a feedback loop where each unanswered message led to more people getting recruited into the search effort. His dramatic silence had triggered a multi-family emergency involving dozens of frantic voicemails from relatives, friends, co-workers, and people who barely knew him, but had been drafted into the crisis by his increasingly desperate fiancée. Her college roommate called to check on his mental health. Her coworkers left messages asking whether he was okay. And even her grandmother left a voicemail in broken English, asking God to bring him home safely. His hotel room had become his command center for monitoring the crisis he had created, with his phone providing constant updates about the growing panic while he sat there feeling like he had achieved something meaningful through his disappearing act. Each new voicemail felt like evidence that people finally understood the gravity of the situation, even though the situation they were panicking about was his unexplained disappearance rather than whatever he thought he had discovered during his social media investigation. His perspective had him believing that everyone's concern validated his dramatic response to finding party photos and ambiguous text messages that probably meant nothing. The family involvement reached ridiculous proportions as the search effort expanded to include people who lived in different time zones and had never met his fiancée. Her aunt called from 3 states away. After hearing about the situation, his brother drove to their house to check whether he was there and just not answering his phone. And cousins from both sides of the family got recruited into a coordination effort that resembled organizing relief efforts for natural disasters. His attempt at being mysterious and dramatic had created more logistical complexity than most actual missing person cases. The disconnect between his internal narrative and external reality reached maximum levels as he sat in his hotel room, feeling vindicated about his dramatic exit, while his phone buzzed with messages from people who were genuinely worried about his safety and mental health. His fiancée's voicemails evolved from confusion to panic to bargaining, with her offering to explain everything if he would just call her back and let her know he was alive. Her desperation got interpreted through his hotel room perspective as a admission of guilt rather than genuine concern for someone she loved who had vanished without explanation. The only call he answered came from his father, who had progressed from confused concern to direct confrontation about his behavior. When his dad demanded to know whether he had lost his mind and pointed out that disappearing without explanation was not how grown adults handled relationship problems, he crafted a nicer story about needing space that through some relationship concerns. His explanation about discovering troubling information and needing time to process it sounded reasonable when he presented it to his father, but the reality of his elaborate investigation and dramatic escape plan would have been much harder to justify to someone asking direct questions about his decision-making process. By evening, his mysterious disappearance had created more drama than most soap operas manage in an entire season, involving more people than some actual emergency situations. His phone contained enough voicemails to fill several hours of listening time, all from people who had been recruited into a crisis that existed mainly because he couldn't bring himself to have one difficult conversation about social media posts. His attempt to be dramatic and mysterious had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams, creating a family emergency that would require weeks to fully resolve. The pressure from his father's direct questions and the mounting family crisis was beginning to crack his resolve about maintaining his dramatic silence. His elaborate disappearing act was about to collide with the reality that he would eventually have to explain his behavior to people who deserved better than mysterious vanishing acts. The confession called catastrophe. His finger hovered over her contact for 20 minutes before he gathered enough courage to actually press call, knowing that this conversation would either save his relationship or destroy it completely. When she answered on the first ring with a voice that sounded like she had been crying for days, his carefully rehearsed opening. Speech evaporated and he found himself stammering like someone trying to explain why they had committed a federal crime. Her genuine relief at hearing his voice made him realize that his mysterious disappearance had caused more panic than his drunk detective work had been worth. She asked whether he was safe and where he had been for 2 days, sounding more concerned about his mental health than prepared to defend herself against accusations of party misconduct. But his sleep-deprived brain had committed to this confrontation strategy, so he pushed forward with his presentation despite her obvious confusion about why he had vanished without explanation. The moment he started explaining his investigation process, complete with timeline analysis and screenshot evidence, the tone of the conversation shifted from relief to complete bewilderment. She listened in stunned silence as he detailed his 8-hour social media forensics session, probably wondering whether the man she planned to marry had suffered some kind of psychological break. His description of organizing evidence and cross-referencing timestamps sounded less like relationship concerns and more like someone explaining their conspiracy theory to a very patient therapist. When he finally got to his actual accusations about what he believed had happened during her bachelorette party, her reaction was not the defensive anger he had expected, but complete confusion about what activities he was referring to based on the social media posts he had analyzed. She asked him to repeat his concerns because she genuinely could not understand what he thought he had discovered. His elaborate theories about coded communications and suspicious behavior sounded increasingly ridiculous when he had to explain them out loud to someone who had actually been there. Her explanations for each piece of evidence demolished his conspiracy theories with boring reality. The mysterious gap in social media posting was because they had been at a karaoke bar that didn't allow phones near the stage. The new Facebook friends were people they had met at the restaurant who turned out to be celebrating a birthday and wanted to stay in touch after sharing dessert and taking group photos. The deleted Instagram story was an unflattering video of her attempting to sing along to a song she didn't know the words to. His most damning piece of evidence, the cryptic message about someone being so bad at the party, turned out to refer to her friend's attempt at line dancing, which had resulted in her falling down and creating the kind of embarrassing moment that generates inside jokes for years. The backup outfits that had fueled his paranoid theories were simply extra clothes packed because someone always spills something during bachelorette parties, and it's better to be prepared than spend the evening in a stained dress. His elaborate presentation of evidence that had made perfect sense in his hotel room sounded absolutely insane when he had to explain it to the person who had actually lived through the events he'd been investigating. Each screenshot and timeline analysis that had felt like smoking gun evidence during his midnight detective work turned out to have completely innocent explanations that any normal person would have assumed without conducting a criminal investigation. His sophisticated research techniques had been applied to solving a mystery that didn't exist. The most humiliating part of his confession was having to explain why he had canceled their entire wedding and disappeared for 2 days, instead of just asking her about the party photos that had triggered his investigation. His dramatic response to finding normal social media posts made him look like someone who handled minor relationship concerns by deploying nuclear weapons. The disconnect between his elaborate reaction and the innocent reality of what had actually happened during her weekend with friends highlighted just how far his paranoid thinking had taken him from rational behavior. Her reaction to his full confession was a mixture of hurt, confusion, and genuine concern for his mental state that made him realize his investigation had revealed more about his own issues than anything problematic about her behavior. She pointed out that his willingness to spend 8 hours analyzing her private communications while refusing to spend 8 minutes having an honest conversation about his concerns indicated serious problems with how he approached the relationship. She told him that real relationships require trust and actual communication, not surveillance and assumptions. The phone call that was supposed to be his moment of dramatic confrontation turned into him apologizing for violating her privacy, creating unnecessary family drama, and making life-altering decisions based on misinterpreted social media posts. His grand presentation of evidence collapsed under the weight of having to explain what he thought. Normal party photos indicated relationship betrayal. The conversation ended with him feeling like someone who had just spent 2 days in hiding because he thought his mailman was a spy, only to discover that the mailman was just delivering mail. His elaborate investigation techniques had been impressive in their thoroughness and organization, but completely useless for actually understanding what had happened during a normal bachelorette party weekend. The man who could analyze social media posts like a forensic expert had somehow failed to consider that the simplest explanation for normal party photos was that normal party activities had occurred. His failure to use basic relationship communication skills had transformed innocent social media posts into a crisis that now involved both their families and required damage control that extended far beyond their relationship. What he didn't realize was that his private midnight investigation had already triggered a chain reaction that would require the family drama explosion. Both sets of parents created their own group chat to coordinate their panic responses while trying to figure out whether their children needed professional intervention or just relationship counseling. His mother called her mother to compare notes about what they thought was happening. Her father called his father to discuss whether the men should drive around looking for him while the women handled phone communication. The parents' emergency coordination system would have impressed disaster relief professionals, complete with assigned roles and regular update schedules for managing a crisis they didn't understand. His brother drove 6 hours from another city after receiving panic calls from both mothers asking him to check local hospitals and hotels. The dedication shown by family members who dropped everything to join a search effort for someone hiding in a hotel room 60 miles away demonstrated how his dramatic disappearance had triggered genuine fear rather than just relationship concern. His sister took time off work to coordinate with his fiance's sister about organizing search efforts and managing the growing list of people who wanted to help locate him. Both families mobilized like search and rescue teams responding to a missing person emergency rather than someone dealing with relationship insecurity through hotel room exile. Her extended family joined the crisis response when news of his disappearance spread through their family network faster than gossip at a high school reunion. Her grandmother called from the nursing home asking whether she needed to pray for him or for the relationship. Her uncle offered to drive up from 2 states away to help with whatever needed to be done. The most absurd aspect of the family drama was how everyone had to pretend they understood what was happening when nobody actually knew what had triggered his dramatic exit. His parents told her parents that he must be dealing with wedding stress, while her parents told his parents that maybe he had cold feet about getting married. Both families created elaborate theories about his behavior that were completely wrong, because none of them knew about his drunk detective work or his conspiracy theories about bachelorette party activities. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from relatives who had been recruited into the search effort by increasingly desperate family members. The family had transformed his relationship problem into a community emergency that involved people who barely knew his middle name, but were now deeply invested in his emotional well-being and geographical location. Each new voicemail from a concerned relative made him realize that his dramatic disappearance had created more problems than whatever he thought he had discovered during his social media investigation. The family crisis reached maximum intensity when both mothers started calling local hospitals to see whether he had been in any accidents that would explain his sudden disappearance and failure to communicate. His dramatic exit had triggered genuine fear that something terrible had happened to him rather than just relationship problems that could be solved through basic conversation skills. Mothers comparing notes about hospital calls probably sounded like law enforcement coordinating a missing person investigation rather than dealing with someone who had decided to handle trust issues by disappearing without explanation. Her family's emotional investment in their relationship became obvious when her father left voicemails apologizing for whatever his daughter had done and begging him to come home so they could work everything out like adults. Her mother's messages expressed genuine concern for his well-being and offered to mediate whatever problems existed between him and her daughter. The parents had taken sides in a conflict they didn't understand, defending their children while trying to preserve a relationship that was important to both families. This hotel room isolation became increasingly difficult to maintain as his phone displayed constant notifications about family members who were genuinely worried about his safety and mental health. The guilt about causing family panic started competing with his anger about party photos and cryptic text messages that probably meant absolutely nothing. His attempt to handle relationship concerns privately had resulted in involving more people than most actual emergencies require. His midnight investigation had been a solo operation, but his dramatic response had created a multi-family crisis that required coordination between parents, siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends across multiple states. His sophisticated detective skills had been completely undermined by his inability to predict that disappearing without explanation would cause exponentially more drama than whatever he thought he had discovered about her weekend with friends. When the truth finally came out about his Instagram analysis and Facebook timeline reconstruction, both families would have to process the fact that their emergency response efforts have been triggered by someone who spent 8 hours analyzing party photos and decided that normal bachelorette activities were evidence of relationship betrayal. The family crisis that had required coordination across multiple states had been caused by social media misinterpretation and communication failure rather than any actual emergency that justified their collective panic and search efforts. His elaborate investigation techniques and dramatic disappearing act had created a crisis that would take weeks to fully resolve, involving apologies to dozens of people and explanations that would make him sound like someone who had suffered a complete mental breakdown. The man who had approached social media analysis with the precision of a federal investigator had somehow failed to consider that his response might create more problems than his original concerns. The aftermath and lessons in digital detective work. The dust settled on what could only be described as the most expensive misunderstanding in recent relationship history. Our protagonist found himself sitting in couples therapy 3 weeks later, trying to explain to a professional counselor how his sophisticated digital investigation techniques had led him to cancel a wedding based on karaoke photos and inside jokes about line dancing failures. The therapist's neutral expression probably masked her amazement at meeting someone who could analyze social media metadata with FBI-level precision, but couldn't ask his fiancée why she looked tired after a weekend with friends. His investigation skills would have impressed actual criminal investigators if they had been applied to solving real crimes, instead of imaginary relationship betrayals. The man had developed surveillance techniques that included cross-platform timeline analysis and social network mapping that demonstrated genuine talent for detective work. Instead, these impressive skills got wasted on analyzing whether his fiancée's friend group was using code words to discuss karaoke performances and restaurant dessert sharing. The elaborate forensic analysis he had conducted on perfectly innocent social media posts revealed way more about his own psychological state than anything problematic about her weekend activities. His willingness to spend 8 hours dissecting Instagram stories and Facebook messages exposed trust issues that ran deeper than normal pre-wedding anxiety. The conspiracy theories he constructed from fragments of digital communication showed a mind that was primed to find evidence of betrayal even when none existed. His brain had taken normal party photos and transformed them into a criminal case through the power of insecurity and confirmation bias. His sophisticated snooping operation had included screenshot organization, timeline reconstruction, and evidence categorization that would have made forensic accountants jealous. But all this technical expertise was completely undermined by his inability to use basic human communication skills that most people learn in elementary school. The same person who could analyze social media activity with scientific precision somehow couldn't figure out how to ask simple questions about a weekend trip. His failure to employ the most fundamental relationship tool available to adults turned innocent party documentation into relationship apocalypse. The family crisis he had created required more coordination and resources than most actual emergencies, involving parents from multiple states, siblings taking time off work, and extended family members who barely knew his middle name but got recruited into search efforts. His dramatic disappearance had triggered genuine panic about his safety and mental health, causing more emotional damage to more people than anything he thought he had discovered during his midnight investigation. The collateral damage from his sophisticated detective work included relationship trust, family peace, wedding deposits, and probably years of awkward holiday conversations. His hotel exile strategy had been more elaborate than most actual witness protection programs, complete with evidence files, secure communications protocols, and long-term accommodation arrangements for someone who was basically hiding from a conversation about party photos. The logistics of his disappearing act demonstrated planning abilities that could have been useful for actual crisis management situations instead of avoiding adult discussions about relationship concerns. His escape plan had involved more strategic thinking than some military operations applied to running away from social media posts that meant absolutely nothing. The phone call confrontation, where his entire case fell apart, demonstrated the fundamental flaw in his approach to relationship problem solving. His courtroom-style presentation of evidence crumbled when faced with simple explanations about karaoke bars, line dancing, and normal social interactions between friends. The elaborate theories he had constructed about coded communications and suspicious behavior sounded completely insane when he had to explain them to someone who had actually been present during the events he was investigating. His detective work had been thorough and systematic, but completely useless for understanding what had actually happened during a normal weekend with friends. The most devastating revelation was that his investigation had been more comprehensive and better organized than his actual relationship communication throughout their entire engagement. He had put more effort into analyzing her social media activity than he had invested in discussing his wedding anxieties or relationship insecurities. His research skills were impressive, but his boyfriend skills needed serious professional development that would probably require months of therapy and relationship counseling to address properly. His digital forensics abilities had uncovered a criminal conspiracy that existed entirely in his own imagination while missing the real issue, which was his complete inability to trust the person he claimed to want to spend his life with. The sophisticated surveillance techniques he had deployed were designed to catch deception, but the only deception involved was him lying to himself about having a healthy relationship while secretly investigating his partner like she was a suspect in federal crimes. His elaborate snooping had revealed that he was not ready for marriage, but not for any of the reasons he had convinced himself were important. The aftermath left him with the realization that his investigation skills were far superior to his relationship skills, and that technical expertise and digital surveillance was meaningless without basic human abilities like trust, communication, and emotional maturity. His sophisticated detective work had been applied to solving a mystery that didn't exist, creating actual problems that were infinitely worse than anything he thought he had discovered. The man who could analyze social media posts like a forensic expert had somehow failed to understand that relationships require talking to each other instead of secretly investigating each other. His elaborate evidence collection and analysis had demonstrated genuine talent for investigation work that could have been useful in professional contexts where such skills were actually needed and appropriate. The organizational systems he had developed for managing digital evidence showed capabilities that could have impressed actual law enforcement professionals if applied to legitimate criminal investigations instead of imaginary relationship crimes. His technical abilities were impressive, but completely wasted on a problem that could have been solved with one honest conversation. The numbers tell the story of just how badly his advanced snooping had backfired. 3 weeks before his wedding, he spent 8 hours investigating normal party photos and called off the entire event based on drunk paranoia and misinterpreted social media posts. His sophisticated investigation techniques had created exponentially more damage than direct communication could have caused, proving that sometimes the most advanced approach is also the most destructive approach to relationship problem solving. The ultimate lesson from his digital detective disaster was that trust and direct communication beats surveillance and assumptions every single time, no matter how sophisticated your snooping techniques might be. His failure highlighted a fundamental truth about relationships that no amount of technical expertise could overcome. The real irony here is watching someone become a master digital detective while completely failing at basic human communication. Our protagonist spent 8 hours analyzing Instagram stories with forensic precision, but couldn't spend 8 minutes having an honest conversation about his concerns. His technical investigation skills were genuinely impressive, but his relationship skills were non-existent. Maybe we should all examine our own late-night social media habits and ask whether we're solving problems or creating them. Sometimes the most sophisticated surveillance techniques are completely useless without the simple ability to talk to the people we care about. Drop a comment about your own digital detective adventures, or just leave a comment if you've ever gone down the Instagram